I'm a researcher at Umeå University, and we're in Abisko National Park, and we're actually on a transect, which is a line, an imaginary line on the mountain that starts down in the birch forest and continues up to the alpine at the summit of Noljen in Abisko National Park. The transect was established in 1917 by Tor Friis, one of the early botanists in this region, where along the line here, with 79 poles, you have 78 imaginary plots where we've been monitoring, starting with him 100 years ago, what the vegetation community looks like in terms of what species are present and their phenology. So think of phenology as nature's calendar. Nature's calendar meaning when the plants green up, when they have flowers, when they have fruit, when they seed, and when they turn yellow in the autumn. So 100 years ago, we have very good data for how the vegetation communities look like in the birch forest, in the shrub zone, and in the alpine. And then starting in 2017, we reinitiated the study, and we have a very good picture of what the vegetation communities look like today. The interesting thing about climate change in this region, in the Barents region, and more broadly in the Arctic and the subarctic, is that most of the change has taken place since the late 1980s. And one of the really interesting things is that it turns out that at these higher latitudes, it's not really the temperature or the amount of sunlight that determines when things start to grow. It's when the snow disappears. And so what we're seeing when we have an earlier snowmelt is the plants start to green up, they start to flower earlier. But I think the thing that surprised me was that when the growing season gets longer, meaning the period that it's warm, it doesn't necessarily mean that the plants take the full advantage. If they start earlier, they finish earlier. I think that's fantastically interesting. And why is that? You know, that's something we're trying to disentangle and kind of figure out. Because in about a month, there will be no leaves on the trees here. Everything will be yellow or brown, and yet it's still warm, and there's no snow. So why is there this part of the growing season that isn't being used? So that's one thing that I think is very interesting. The other big change that we see down here in the birch forest, is that the density of the trees, meaning if you were to say take a square kilometer and count the number of trees within that square kilometer, it's increased. So the canopies area is increased, the number of trees have increased, and they've gotten taller. And that's a reflection of the fact that the summers are warmer. Now, if we move up the mountain, we see that the tree line is moving up as well. And that's a reflection of the fact that the autumn, winter, and springs are warmer. Because if the summer is warm, the trees can get bigger here, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the trees can move and survive higher up the mountain. But when the winter warms, it means that we basically are getting a shift of the entire kind of climate or temperature niche of the plant communities up the mountains. And so today, the tree line is about 230 meters further upslope. Now, not in elevation, but upslope than it was today. So when you start at the bottom of the transect here, you have to walk 230 meters further upslope to reach the forest limit compared to 100 years ago. That's Arctic greening.